Welcome to What If We Can Change It All, the podcast.
A podcast created by Movement.Medicine.
My name is Shadisa.
And my name is Janina.
We believe that we have the power and therefore we can change it all.
This podcast is all about reclaiming your power. Hello everyone, and welcome to a new episode. Today we have Rachael Burns, and the thing that I find really beautiful is we know of each other and we've been in like similar spaces, but we actually don't know all the things. So we are actually excited to get to know you even better through this way, actually. That being said, I am very excited about this episode and just to like have a beautiful conversation with her. But to round it all off, do you mind introducing yourself a bit?
Yeah, of course. And I'm super happy to be here. I mean, it's such a beautiful opportunity for three empowered women to have a conversation around all of the things, literally, like what your podcast says. It's all of the things, what if you can find that happiness and balance and confidence and belief in yourself in all areas of your life? You know, what does that look like? And I love that you invite so many different people in to give their perspective, because it is all of those layers, isn't it? That you get a different layer and a different layer and a different layer. And this is really what I'm about. Is I've spent the last 20 years on my healing journey. And for me, it's been about getting so many different perspectives, everything from like scientific to spiritual, and to be able to understand ourselves fully and remove all of like the limiting beliefs, the limiting habits, the limiting actions that get in the way of our happiness, that get in the way of us living the magic of the moment. So yeah, I mean, I work with a lot of different tools, everything from fitness and nutrition to mindset and meditation. And it's ultimately with the goal of know thyself, love thyself, accept thyself, and live life through that. Yeah, that you get to experience every moment like we are now through the filter of how can we serve from a place of inner abundance rather than needing the outer world to tell us that we are worthy human beings. Yeah.
I love that. I honestly really love that. And maybe to dive straight in, like, how did you start this journey for yourself?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think some people have like this aha moment when they wake up and they're like, I need to change my life. I didn't really have that. I had lots of mini aha moments of this like gradual awakening to all of the things I was doing to myself to make me unhappy. And it was, you know, one after another over the last 20 years, where I've just realized that I get to make my life incredible and I am in the driver's seat. But my journey started like 21 years ago. And I was going through severe depression, and I thought that that was normal. I thought that that was just how I felt and that there wasn't anything different. And it was when I came out the other side of that and I started to feel a lot better, I realized that life didn't have to be that way. And that was the beginning of the process. It was like, oh, I actually get to be happy. I get to feel good. And the first change was I started to exercise and I started to eat better. And that was literally like the first initial thing that began the whole chain reaction, let's say.
Love that.
Yeah.
Beautiful. And I can so relate also to this story in a sense that the nuggets slowly drop and then there's like this little aha moments and this little moments where like, oh yeah, actually something needs to change, or like this little insights you get like really from life, from people around you. And I like that, at least how I look through your Instagram and everything, like how this story and how you share about I started with my body and with food is also a way how you support women right now, right?
Yeah, and maybe this is something you girls can relate to, because I know you work with the body and dance and movements and all of these things, is that we can come to working with our bodies from the perspective of not enoughness, or we can come to it from the perspective of caring for our vessel, building belief in ourselves, building confidence in the way that we treat our bodies. And I imagine, in the fitness industry, I've worked in that for many years. And I imagine with dance as well, it's very apparent that there's a lot of focus on exercising to look good enough for people to tell us we are enough, and to fit into a box. And we're perpetually imprisoned by that, because it doesn't matter whether you're moving towards it or you have it. If your belief is that you need it to be good enough, then even when you've got it, you're living in fear of losing it. Mm-hmm. And that was very much the thing for me, is that when I was very much focused on that being my point of, like, my priority, make sure your body looks good, and other people will tell you you're good enough. External validation is the powerful thing. It didn't matter if my body was on point. I was always in fear of losing those results. And so there's this massive shift. And I imagine you girls, you know, this shift when you start to think, well, I am enough. And I don't train my body so that somebody else tells me it. I do it because I know it and I want to feel it.
I really love that perspective. And I think it is so important, because we are so conditioned also to like seek that outside validation, right? But what if we can actually start within? And you also, like, the funny thing is, like, when you start within, you also see, oh yeah, it actually doesn't matter what and how someone else perceives me in that way, as long as I can be fully happy with myself. And then you're gonna see that it ripples actually out to the outside, and, like, I don't know, then it's this magical moment that happens, right? But if you don't fully are able to embrace that yet, you're always like riding the waves of like the not enoughness, and like riding the waves of like, I need to do better. It becomes a need then, and a hustle and an addiction also.
Yeah, definitely. And I was chatting with a client the other day, and we were talking about what the different types of beauty, and how, I mean, social media, we can use that as an example, right? Where you see so much beauty, and you can almost feel the energy through certain, whether it's videos or images, that it's a beauty that's asking you to tell it it's beautiful, whether it's a woman, a man, or otherwise. And then you can really feel when it's a beauty that comes from self-acceptance and authenticity. And it's that when an image is captured and the person looks perfect, and yet you know that they only feel good because they look perfect. And then when you catch, for example, you see somebody, maybe there's a girl in a park reading a book and the wind is blowing in her hair and she's smiling because she's reading something funny. And there's something so real about that beauty. And it can only be captured when somebody's not thinking they're being watched. And it's, how can we come back to that authenticity where we get to be ourselves, we get to stand in our power, and then be the light for others, so they get to remember that they get to be that as well.
It's really about letting go of the standards we created as a society, and going back into to the relationships with ourselves and finding that connection instead of seeking the connection and outside validation.
So what have you girls found has helped you with, I mean, maybe it hasn't been a transition, maybe you've always felt that way. I'm just imagining, because that was my reality. But have you found there have been like key things that have really shifted it for you with the relationship with self and body?
Ooh.
I think just becoming more aware of what's happening within and how I am treating and talking to myself. And I think that started like in the dance world, right? Like going from audition to audition and project to project, and always having this period of time where you're just rehearsing, where there's a lot of, I think I had a point in my life where I saw there's a lot of judgment on how I was performing or how I was as a dancer or even as a person. And then having the outside validation of the audience at the end, like during the performances. And at some point, I don't want to say I took a break, because I didn't, but it felt like I took a break somehow, although I was still dancing. But at some point I was again in a bigger project, and then I was like, oh, actually, it doesn't matter what the choreographer thinks of me, right? It doesn't matter if the audience likes me or not. It's just, am I enjoying this process? Am I standing behind what I'm doing? And I think that's like the process was becoming aware of how I was actually trained to judge myself, like during dancing, and then that became also normal in my normal life, I would
Yeah.
say. And it's becoming aware of that like pattern you're creating here, and then trying to shift that with compassion as well. And I think sometimes the compassion part, or it can be hard for me to have that compassion part as well, right? To just see it and then, ah, yeah, this is happening and it's okay. And now I can shift it, but then also judging that part. So it's, for me, it was, and it still is really about becoming aware and then also have that compassion or that gentle voice towards myself, I
Yeah,
would say.
I think that's really important because we both have been dancing from a very young age. And like one of the first thing that you're taught is that you always need to look in the mirror, like, and see what you're doing wrong. So from a very young age on, like that mirror is like the biggest judgment that we have, right? It was for me at least. Like you see everything that's not right, and you also start comparing yourself with other people. And I think I think it was 2 years ago, I had like such a moment. I was in the elevator of my apartment building with my sister, and there's like a beautiful mirror there. And we stepped into the elevator, and I was like, "Whoa, I look very tired today. It's not my day." And my sister was like, "Janine, what are you doing?" I was like, "Well, look at me. I can use some mascara right now." And she was like, "Janine, what are you doing?" And I was like, "Oh, I still do it." It's like also like integrated in my normal life, right? And it's not only dancers who do that, like everyone does that, right? But for me, that it really clicked for me that I'm bringing like the insight in the studio, I'm bringing that with me to my day-to-day life, and therefore I don't have to be such an asshole to myself all the time, because that's actually what you're doing, right? You're being the biggest bully to yourself. And that was really something that I was like, okay, no more. We're not going to do that anymore.
Yeah. It's also, we live in a society where there are mirrors absolutely everywhere. And so in my house, I have one visible mirror, one full length mirror is covered, and I have one visible mirror. And I actually set up the lighting around that mirror so that it complements my skin tone. So that every time I look at it, I see what I like. And it's really powerful. And when I turn the top light on, it's brighter, and I choose not to look at that because it causes shadows. I'm like, I don't need to. And it's we have this necessity to always be looking at the physique and staying at other people's houses, seeing how many mirrors they have in their house. So we're constantly aware of how we look. And the question is, does it really matter? Ultimately, does it really matter? Obviously, we want to look good. But if we look like a little bit tired, or, I mean, the aging process is a thing we all go through. You know, I just turned 40, so I see changes in my skin, in my body that happen with age. And it's ultimately, does it really matter to my happiness? Can I still truly be happy? Can I enjoy the magic of life? Can I enjoy the magic of every moment? Does not looking 20 anymore destroy that? Only if I choose it to be the truth. Only if I choose that to affect my happiness. And so it's like that liberation of like, I choose not to allow it to affect me, because it used to affect me a lot. You know, I had anorexia, then I had food addictions, and so the image in the mirror was a huge battle for many years. And so the liberation from that battle is freedom. You know, if this is something, any message that can be taken away from today, is when you stop battling with yourself and you actually start to think, well, how can I see the magic in this moment? How can I experience something beautiful with the conversation with this person? And always be looking through that filter, rather than the filter of, how can I find reasons why I'm not enough, why this person is judging me as being this or that. Literally, that continual shift is really, really powerful.
I love that. It's always a choice that you can make, right? And I think that is always like the most important thing, like instead of like seeing all the things you don't like? What if we see all the things we do like, and how we do feel about ourselves, like, and how we can actually make ourselves feel better instead of like just putting ourselves down?
Yeah, and we think it can sound fluffy, you know, the whole concept of be nice to yourself, and yet I don't think it's fluffy at all to live a joyful life. You know, if that is literally the difference between being miserable and waking up feeling shit, and then being genuinely sorry, is it okay to swear? Yeah, okay, good. Yeah. You know, I used to wake up every morning feeling dread. That was my reality for years. And, you know, anyone who goes through like anxiety or depression or low self-confidence will be familiar with that feeling of dread in the morning, of waking up and thinking, oh no, I really don't want to have to deal with today. And whether that's like, I used to spend hours before I would even manage to leave my bedroom. And, you know, it would take me even longer to leave the house. And, you know, I was failing at university because I couldn't get myself outside of the door. And so I wasn't going to lectures and I wasn't facing the world because of this inner dialogue. Yeah. And it's to remove that feeling of dread and actually wake up feeling excited about your life every single morning is freedom. And so it's like letting go of this concept that kindness to self is fluffy, because it's not. Kindness to self sometimes is actually being determined and being strict with getting shit done, and, you know, not listening to the inner voice of, oh, you know, just eat another piece of cake, it'll be okay, or be mean to yourself just a little bit longer, it's fine.
Yeah. And it's so common, right? It's so common to be mean, to have all those voices, and it's also so human, so there's nothing wrong about it. And I also had a period when I also didn't want to leave the house, and I quit my internship, and it's so, it can be so dark, and it can be so, or I felt so fearful to change that around and to be happy again and to enjoy life again. And it was such a journey to just be in the world again. But then when you find that switch and you are able to step out again and to, I mean, it's a journey. It's not like, okay, now I step out and I'm happy again. But like when you find that switch and it happens gradually, you will find back your confidence and you will find back your joy in life, and you will find back who you are. And that's still a journey, and will always be a journey, and will always evolve and change. And I think that's also the beautiful thing. But it's about, I don't know, it's about, I would love for it to be not so common to have all those dark, not that dark is bad, because there's also beauty in the darkness, but like to have those, how to describe, to have those very dark moments because you're so judgmental about yourself. And I think it's a beautiful thing that I went through it actually, and it gave me a lot. But what if it's different, right? What if we learned from a younger age how to talk to ourselves instead of having to go through that process? And I think that those processes will always be there, but they don't have to be that dark, I believe. Not always.
And I mean, something I chat with my students about is, because I like to be very honest, is there are certain elements of ourselves that are so deep rooted that that voice may stay with us forever. And it's how we choose to relate to that voice. You know, so for me, the voice of Annie is, she's very rarely there. She does pop up sometimes. And then it's, how do I choose to relate to that voice? And to, you know, to do the inner work and to be so consistent with it that I perceive myself as a confident, strong woman. I embody those traits in myself. And so it's so hard for me now to follow the voice of Annie, because it doesn't resonate with who I've become. And so I hear her and I realize that all she wants is the best for me. You know, all she's ever wanted, she's afraid that if I get fat, that people won't accept me. And so she has this belief that I need to be ultra skinny to be of value to society. And that's something I learned at a very, very young age. And so understanding that that is what she believes, I'm able to say, well, I know that that is what she wants for me. It's for me to be of value. So I choose to find my value elsewhere. I find my value within. And I no longer get pulled by her. She doesn't have this strength over me. And I honor that it's a part of me that needs to be loved and nurtured. And that's really what it is.
I think that's one of the most powerful things I got to experience myself and also use with my clients, is that part or that voice just actually needs space and love. And then it becomes less powerful or not dominating. She is or he is not dominating your life anymore, because it got space and you know why it's there, right? And ultimately, all those places we don't like that much are there to protect us or to keep us safe.
Yeah.
It is that belief that the darkness, we've got this perception that there's some monster under our bed. And, you know, when you turn the light on, we realize that there's not a monster there. And that's often what, with the darkness, we think it's a monster. And one of my teachers, she gave this analogy, and I absolutely love it. If you imagine that all of your worries, your fears, your anxieties, it's like bags of garbage or bags of rubbish that you chuck to the back of the cave, and the cave is your mind. And so you're chucking all of your worries to the back of your cave rather than dealing with them. And so what happens is that begins to rot, and that rot becomes smelly, and it becomes disease, and it becomes things that are much bigger than the actual bag of rubbish itself. And so when we actually choose to go in and to pull the rubbish out and to deal with it, one, you know, it's like turning on a light in the dark and realizing it's not a monster under your bed. It's a part of you that wants to be seen. It's an unprocessed emotion. It's a part of you that didn't feel loved at some point in your life. And that's literally what it is. So the more that you learn to love that part of yourself, the less it will pull you into those dark spaces. And I don't know about you girls, maybe you can say something around this, is that I find that having continual examples of other women and men around me who embody the traits that I desire to learn, this has been a huge piece for me. And this is something I started very early on in my journey, is to be inspired by people who are 10 steps ahead of me in the journey, and to not just learn from what they teach, but to learn from who they are, how they think, how they treat themselves, the books they read, all of those things.
I love that part that you said. It's not just about the things that they teach, right? Because that is such a big deal, actually, because you can know all the things, but if you're like the person that you look up to, or the person that you want to learn from, is not like living the talk or like doing the things, like it is also not going to resonate with you on that level, right? Because it is really important to find someone and find a teacher who's actually also like integrating the things that they are teaching, because having the knowledge is one thing, but living the knowledge is something else.
Yeah, and I think it's something you both really experience. We're like, you're such a geek. So when it comes to inner work, I think I would say you're like having like coaches and being in containerships and then reading all the books. And I think like being in those spaces and indeed having someone that is 10 steps ahead of us, or somewhere we want to be at some point in our lives, really helped us going faster. But not going faster while we felt like rushed or pushed or not natural, right? It's going faster because you're in a different energy field. And so it happens actually naturally and in a flow, which I think for me was so different, instead of one thing and needing to do it all by myself and then pushing myself very hard, like pushing myself so hard that my body almost went like this, and then I couldn't really grab it. And actually I did understand it in my mind, but I wasn't living it. And being like in those spaces really helped me to embody that part in myself, I would say.
Yeah, that's really the power of community and the power of like a container, right? To do it like together alone, to being alone into togetherness, because that is something that is so strong.
Because there's so much we don't know, right?
Yes.
And we've all heard that phrase, and we don't realize how there are such small shifts that can make such profound differences. And you can be introduced to something because you're not in an environment where that is normalized.
Mm-hmm.
You can be introduced to something in a container and it's like, oh, fuck, I didn't even realize this was a thing.
Mm.
Or I didn't realize that somebody like me could do something like that. And what I find with all of the coaches that I've had is that it's what they normalize for me because of what they embody. They normalize a way of being, acting, thinking, so that I take big leaps forwards. And they teach me things that I didn't even think to look at. It's all of, and obviously it's the blueprints. I remember when I first started, I was looking at very yang coaches. You know, maybe I was going for things like Tony Robbins just to start waking me up in the process. And then I started to look at like the more yin coaches, and then what about the combination of the two, yeah? And it's just awakening ourselves to the realization of how much we limit ourselves with our thoughts. And the more we realize that it is our thoughts that limit us, the more we think, oh, so I can do anything I want. I can become anything I desire. Is literally about taking that leap of faith. Oh, wow, damn, that's exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think being in these spaces or those spaces really helped me indeed to realize that I can have it all, right? Or that I can have everything what my soul desires, not my ego, because I think that's also a different part. But like I always really claimed the identity of being a dancer. And then when I started doing this work, I started doing it for myself, right? But at some point I started or wanting or felt the desire that I wanted to help others. But then in my head, I was like, but I can't be a dancer and also like give healing sessions or be a coach or create containers. And so for a very long time, there was like this duality within where I was like, but how can I be both? Because both need a lot of energy and a lot of effort. And it wasn't before I actually stepped in a container and had a conversation with like people there that was like, oh, but actually it's both about energy. Like dancing is also about energy. So if I find for myself the bridge between them, then actually it is not a lot. It's just a different way of expressing that. And yes, probably I would have also understood that like for myself without being in a container, but I think it would have taken me years actually. Mm-hmm. And now it just happened. I was like, okay, but if that is possible, then I actually can invest more and I can do more trainings because I'm a geek. But so I can do that, right? But before I was like, but actually, because I was very much interested in shamanism and I wanted to do a study with Alberto Fioldo, but then I was like, I don't have the time. I need to focus on my dancing. I'm not sure about the money. How? And then was like, but all my people I know are all dancers and they are not interested. Mm-hmm. And then somehow at some point I think you stepped in a new container and we started talking. And then I was like, but actually I can have it all. And I started dedication, but you have to see it. You have to open your mind, and probably it happens faster with different people than the circles you're already in. And that's really something containers did for me.
Yeah. There's a lot of power there.
Yeah.
It's beautiful to see that. Maybe it's because in the last few years I've started to step into this world more and more. It feels that there is a sudden awakening to containers being a thing, or maybe it is a new thing. I'm so grateful that this container reality is growing, and that more and more of us are able to tap into the tools and the transformations that can happen. As it see, like before, I always thought of having a coach or having a mentor was for the elite. I never realized that it could be for anybody who sets their mind to it and makes it a priority. So I just recently reinvested in my mentor, and it's a big investment and it was scary. And of course you go through all of the questioning of self. And then I was like, well, what if I make the decision from the place of who I am becoming rather than where I am right now? Because this is literally, you can resonate with this a lot, right? because we've had common teachers, that it can be so easy for us to make decisions in our lives from where we are. And so we stay, our growth is so slow, and we move in the same circles, and we think the same things, and we say the same beliefs. And it's the moments that we take leaps of faith, whether it's in a container, or we change jobs, or we leave a relationship that's not working anymore. We do something that we keep putting off because it feels scary, but we know is going to be good for us. And then we take that leap of faith. And it's literally when we do that, it's like fireworks. All of these things start to fall into place, and we start to take huge leap forwards in our journey. Yeah.
I love that you said that, because I think that is so important, because often, like, when we begin, we think that we are the only ones who like find it that scary, right? And like are in that duality: should I do it, should I do not, like, am I worth the money, am I not, like this whole thing that happens in our head, right? But it is so normal to have that, because every time you invest in a container, every time you do something, like, it's completely in our nature to maybe be a bit scared, but also like embrace the fears maybe, and know, okay, but this is actually gonna take me where I want to go. Like, it's good for my soul, right? It's not only about like, I don't know, like the outer self-care, it's also about the inner self-care, right? And I think like everyone who's like in at that point right now in question, if they need to invest or not, or like are they ready to do it or not, like it is normal, and we all have it, and we have it, and it's like, I don't know, we have invested like lots of times, but every time it's like this little oomph before we do it, right? And that is so normal. But just know that you can actually do it, and you have the power to do it. And exactly like you said, like if you put your mind to it, you can do it all.
Yeah, and it's one of the things I've found with all of the changes I've made. Yeah, I've got this. I've used my personality type now to my advantage, which used to be to my detriment. You know, so the things that led me to anorexia, depression, food addictions, I've now learned to channel that way of being into growth rather than into the opposite. And I've always had this capacity to focus on something I desire, and no matter what, find a solution to get me there. Not as like a stubborn mindset, just this openness to realizing that there is always a solution to everything, and to keep moving, however big the step is, towards what I desire. And it's a superpower that I highly recommend people tapping into, is just the capacity to say, yeah, I'm going to keep going. Today, it might be a tiny step. Tomorrow, it might be a massive step, whatever you're moving towards. Because in my business, for example, wanting to run a business and have a balanced nervous system, wanting to love what I do and also have time off. Before, I didn't think it was possible to run a business and have time off. And then I decided that time off was really important. And so I managed to make it happen, like a whole 5 weeks over summer. I mean, who runs a business and has 5 weeks off at summertime? Very few people. I was like, no, this is happening. And so we can make things happen if we desire it enough. And if we trust to allow the love in, allow the magic in, because we don't allow it in so many times.
Yeah. I love this.
So what would you say is, you know, with the name of your podcast, what does that mean to you, having it all?
Ooh, that's a really good question.
Having it all. I think having it all for me is about allowing yourself to have it all, right? Because I think having it all comes, or not having it all comes a lot with not allowing yourself. And I think this looks different for everyone, but I think in a lot of ways we're not allowing ourselves to have it all. And this can be already in the small things, right? It's about going to the groceries and not allowing yourself to have that more expensive chocolate. It's like super small, but I think for me it starts there, and then I also like to take it really big, right? And then it's about allowing myself to feel free in life, allowing myself to feel happy, allowing myself to do the things I love. But I think it already starts with small things, and then it's actually everywhere, allowing yourself to feel loved, allowing yourself to have it all that your soul desires. And for me, it's really about freedom, about feeling happy, feeling joyous, feeling love, feeling loved. That's really important for me. And I think in some essence for all of us, but then in different ways, right? And really also about understanding myself in all levels, because I think we're also really conditioned, maybe even, to push away all those sides where we already talked about, right? About the darker sides, about the shadow sides, about what we desire, but be really conditioned in how it's supposed to be. And giving ourselves away in a sense, like health wise, but also decision wise. And it's really about allowing yourself to have it all, like your own thoughts, like your own love, your own everything, I would say, for me. That's a bit of a ramble, but yeah.
No, yeah, I totally agree. And it's like, it's kind of boring, but I kind of have the same answer also because we have the same company and stuff. So our visions are good aligned. But I would say, like, for me, it is really about the importance, I guess, to sometimes switch it off, to just sometimes switch like all the thoughts off and just really listen to your feeling instead, and to really like allow that to be there, but also just to be open for the magic that is there, right? To sometimes just not think about the things. I think that was like such a big journey for me, to not think about the things, right? I can be like quite a big overthinker, and it's also in my human design. Like, I am a triple split definition, so making decisions can be very hard for me. And then, like, for me, and just hearing and allowing myself to actually, oh yeah, but I feel a type of way. And that often is like more important, because that can actually lead us to having it all, like feeling instead of thinking. And for you, I'm very curious.
No, I'm really inspired. Like, some ideas came up as you were talking, and I think something for the listeners that something I found crucial in my journey that's helped me to be consistent with it. And this is something I saw, when I was working in fitness. I saw the people that were consistent and the people who would drop in and out, and would find it really hard to maintain their results. And like, the huge difference between the two, one is, what has allowed me to be consistent is that I am always feeding my mind with the things that I want to learn, and that adds more and more knowledge, wisdom, inspiration, and expansion to my perception of what is possible, to expand my mental construct, to break my current limiting paradigms. So literally every day, every conversation I have, every book I read, every film I watch is all about feeding into the narrative I desire for myself, because life is all about the narrative we give to it. Yeah, and you can have 10 people having the same experience, and it is different for every single one, and it's all about the inner narrative. And so it's, if the listeners are looking for something that helps them, it's what can you do today that feeds into the inner narrative that you want to grow, that you want to strengthen. And that's something for me that's made a big, big difference. And we do that until a new idea or a new concept becomes so normal for us, we don't think about it anymore. So for example, with people who, I would observe people in fitness, and there is a huge difference between somebody who is healthy and lean, let's say. Well, let's use lean as an example. That's not the only body type, but this is one that a lot of people go for, right? Is healthy and lean. You can have somebody who is healthy and lean, but they do not embody being a healthy, lean person. They are doing the things to get a healthy, lean body, but they haven't embodied it. They don't perceive themselves as that. And so the minute that they stop their gym membership, go on holiday, have fun with their friends, they start to lose the results because they haven't embodied being that person. It's not easy for them. And this was me for many years. I was going to the gym and I was super fit, super lean. Everyone would look at me and be like, oh yeah, you are a lean, fit person. and yet I hadn't embodied being that. And so I would go away for 2 weeks, and then I would come back and I would have to go through the process of getting back on track. And it was always a bit of a struggle. It was never just was me. And it's such a massive shift when we actually say, okay, how do I become that? I'm not on a diet. I'm not training. You know, I eat healthily because it feels good. I eat healthily because that is in alignment with who I am. I exercise because it makes me feel amazing, connected, embodied, grounded. Yeah, and there's such a huge difference, and there's so much joy in the second version and so much struggle in the first version.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think you also create a lot of resistance, right? When you're going in and out and in and out, there's like this resistance of needing to do it again and going through that process again. And when you embody it, it's just who you are. And even if you're not there yet, it's just who you are still.
Yeah. I think that's really important.
Yeah. Any like women or men or others who are having struggles with body image or staying healthy, whatever it, you know, when it comes to the body, it's the more that we focus on the inner work as our priority, as we're doing the other things, and focusing a lot less on the outer work, the easier the embodying it becomes. There's this physicist, he's like the rock star of physics in England, because he used to be in a boy band, but he's actually a physicist called Brian Cox. And I love the way he talks about physics. He makes it really accessible. I highly recommend watching things to do with him. And he talks about how we are life with the desire of expansion of itself. And the universe has evolved to the point that atoms are capable of contemplating themselves. And that is literally what we are. We are atoms that have evolved to the point that we can contemplate ourselves and question who we are and what our role is in this universe. That is what human is. And we get so caught up and so lost in thinking that we are our title, our name, our bodies, all of those things. And we forget that what drives us biologically is the fact that we are life.
Yeah.
And that drive can either lead us towards self-destruction, or it can lead us towards an internal utopia, literally heaven within. And it's, how do you use that biological power? What direction does it take you in?
I love that. That's such a big one.
Yeah. Looking at the time,
I feel we could talk forever.
I know, it feels like it just flew by, honestly.
Yeah. But I do want to almost end with your ultimate tip for the listeners. I know there's
I actually wrote this one down, and I'd love to share it as I wrote it, because I was really like channeling in that moment. So my ultimate tip is, you're the person you spend the whole of your life with, and your body is your vessel. And so building a relationship with yourself and your body are key to your happiness, success, and inner peace.
Goosebumps.
I loved it. It was such a good one.
Yeah. I think it also sums up the whole, it also sums up the whole conversation we just had, right? So it's,
it's like the perfect tip with this episode.
Yeah.
So how can people find you?
Yes.
Of course. I mean, the best way to follow me is probably Instagram. So I'll share my Instagram handle with you girls. And if people are listening close to when we record this, then I've got a free event coming up called Strong, Confident Women. And I'll do, free events every now and then where people can participate and really learn the internal tools to build that perception and to build that filter. So I'll share all of those details, and
When is the event?
When is the event? We haven't set a date. We're looking at the end of September.
Okay.
So, being September 2023, we haven't set an exact date, but it'll probably be 2 or 3 hour-long sessions, and we really like to flow. It's a lot of story sharing, inspiration, and that sort of thing. So, yeah.
Cool. Then we
Yeah.
actually want to thank you. We had a really good and lovely conversation, actually. Like we said, we have just to stop, but we have gone to it was like really powerful. So thank you so much. Yeah, I guess that. Yeah, we will see. No, well, you will hear us in the next episode. I'm wishing you all a beautiful day, evening, or morning.
Thank you. And thank you, Rachel.
Thank you.